This is Nick Dimitra. I'm here with my business partner from Australia, Anthony Caldwell. Anthony is a security expert, and we're going to be doing a case study on hacked websites. We do these from time to time. Today, we're studying Christopher Pyne. He's the Federal Minister for Education and Training in Australia. Or as you'll find out, as Google likes to call him, he's the Minister for Erectile Dysfunction and Student Discounts. Um, before we begin, I just want to say that it's not us calling him that. It's definitely Google, and Anthony will point that out in a second. Anthony, I'll let you take it away.
No worries, thanks, Nick. All right, well, look, as you can see from the screenshot here, we've got on the left-hand side some nice Viagra tablets. On the right, far right, we've got Microsoft Home and Student. Both of these products were at one stage represented on the minister's website, Christopher Pyne's website, and you could actually head on through there with a possible buy two scenario. So I'll just move on to the next slide now. So a bit of play on words here through an advanced Google search shows us the minister full and Viagra, and we've got a definitive hit here on Christopher Pyne's website showing that non-prescription Viagra is available, or Viagra is available.
So, what would cause these kind of pages to show up? What are we looking at?
Well, look, we're looking at specific black hat tactics, black hat SEO, search engine optimized tactics, where the content management system that Mr. Pyne has used has been exploited with keyword page titles being inserted and metadata inserted into the page, along with a bunch of links at some point in time. But this sort of dates back, almost 36 months.
So
yes, we've been monitoring.
So we've been monitoring this for, as you said, the last 36 months. So how many times has this site been sort of hacked and fixed and then hacked again?
My best estimate would be probably 3 or 4 times.
3 or 4 times over the past 36 months.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, you said a few things there. So SEO, when you say SEO, you're referring to search engine optimization, and black hat would be people that are trying to circumvent sort of typical ranking factors that would be present, and they're trying to essentially cheat the system. Was that correct?
Yeah, that's 100% correct.
Okay.
They're looking to garner the results to improve their products within search. Yeah? So using a very authoritative site, you can't get any more authoritative than a federal minister's website. At the end of the day, I don't think.
Okay. And we also mentioned student discounts. Is there an example of that?
Yeah, look, there is. Heading on into some of the other hacks that have occurred, or the keyword tactics, are a bunch of Microsoft and software products across a great spectrum of tools. So, like, there's Adobe and a lot of Adobe products. There are Microsoft products all the way through.
Okay, so
And we can see
Google's
those
calling
in
him.
great detail. I'll just go back.
So Google's saying that he's the minister,
You
basically, as
there?
we said, for student discounts and Viagra. Now, I think at this point we need to have full disclosure. We were asked to have a look at some political websites for the party there in Australia. Is that correct?
Yeah, look, that was last year, and that process began June, July, and then proceeded on through to about November. But we'd also been in discussions with Labor at one stage.
Okay. And I'm personally very excited to finally be able to shoot the video because we've been monitoring this since then, and part of our research is how long it takes people to react to an identified hack or a threat. So how long have we been monitoring this since the original presentation to the political party there?
Well, that would almost be 8 months, I guess, almost 8 months down the track now. We're
Okay.
sitting here talking about it.
So it took 8 months for them to act, and just to clarify, this particular website, pine.com.au, was part of that presentation. Is that right?
That's correct. That
Okay.
was it. Was one of the very first slides that I presented in the presentation.
Okay. So I know that you and I have had many discussions on this topic, and just for the sake of the people watching the presentation, can you describe to me how serious this kind of a breach is? I mean, on the surface, we poked light at it a little bit. Minister for Viagra, minister for student discounts. We're just trying to have a little bit of fun with it, with the presentation. But in all seriousness, when you have this kind of security breach for a particularly one that's so trusted, what are the consequences to the visitors?
Well, look, the consequences can be many, but ultimately, the 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 people behind this style of exploit are cyber criminals. So ultimately, their end is identity theft, but they start small with a long con processed over time, where they'll exploit the content management system, gain access to it, create new pages with keyword specific page titles, and then insert links to other sites that they've hacked. Some of those sites may have malware and viruses within their page content, and we've seen that in some of the results that we've presented previously. And ultimately, the reputation for this site goes down. And as you know, if we type in Christopher Pyne and looking for Pyne online within the Google search results, he's just not there. I think he's on page 2 or 3,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of signifies, so I guess, part of his, the trust factors that are applicable to his site. It also highlights from a governance perspective, and don't forget these guys are in government,
Mm-hmm.
is that their governance is pretty poor. And look, it just so happens he's the Minister for Education and Training, and it goes on to highlight the fact that even though there's multiple disciplines within IT providing the website service, we can safely say that the hosting company and the people responsible for the content management software on the server within the hosting company have let the site down in a great way. But then so have the management, the internal management and frameworks that Christopher Pyne is using to help govern his website. They haven't been enacted correctly, and there's virtually no ICT governance in play. And by monitoring it for 36 months, and specifically the last 8 months, that's been really highlighted and rammed home to us. Is that from an ICT governance perspective, as it relates to good governance, it's just not there.
Okay, for
It's
people that don't know, what does ICT governance mean?
information communication technology governance.
Okay. Not a problem.
So excuse the mobile phone ringing. Um, it, it, and governance it directly relates to best practices. So how do we govern a website? What are the factors to ensure that we're mitigating risk, that we're ensuring that all users can actually interact with the
Right.
page content, that it actually displays on mobile as well as it displays on television or desktop or laptop or iPad. uh, look, here in Australia, we've got corporate governance, and that's directly related to uh, the Corporations Act here in Australia, just like
Okay.
in Canada and the US and the UK. And that sort of signifies how we run a corporation
Okay.
and what we're then compliant to, you know,
So
such as privacy policies, Spam Act, etc.
so take us through some more of these, so we can all understand what you meant by the long con, and so we can see what sort of other exploits this website has had. And I just want to point out that this was there as recently as last week. I believe we looked at it, and then we finally were able to shoot the video this week because the new website went up. So these are still fresh in Google. I mean, they're still showing up there. The URLs are still there. So just take us through some of the other slides.
Yes, certainly. The other slides include, look, point online for Viagra, and as we can see here, there's 856 results where at some point in time, each of these was a page available through Google, and we've captured some cache images, and we'll get into those as we go through the slides. So
Okay.
Viagra, obviously, that's the tongue-in-cheek thing for us, the erectile dysfunction.
Hmm. And I
The
see in
Pyne,
here that there are different terms. There are over 800 pages, and there's like generic Viagra, cheapest Viagra. So it looks like they're using all these pages to target. What are they doing? Different key terms, or what is it?
yeah, different keyword terms, and different online pharmacies or pharmacies around the globe.
Okay.
So there's online drug shop, there's the Canadian online pharmacy, there's one in the UK. They're also different strengths, I guess, of tablets, 50 milligrams, 100
I
milligrams,
see.
worldwide shipping. So all the keywords that you would traditionally see in a legitimate pharmacy, e-commerce pharmacy
Hmm.
website, and it's about pushing their results up within search, giving some credibility to it, so that the unsuspecting user clicks,
So
hands
this
over their
this looks
identity
like a
document,
lot of
credit
what we
card.
do for clients in terms of getting them, what we call casting a wide net for key terms and trying to, bring in a volume of traffic to a website with different key terms, but they're just doing it in an illegal, criminal way.
Well, that's right. They've got a refund policy there, money back guarantee terminology, uh, to sucker them in effectively to show some form of legitimacy. So the unsuspecting user goes, "Oh, well, that must be for real," and then proceeds to interact with the website.
Okay, great.
So if we head on into the next slide, we've got Pyne again, and this is the Canadian online pharmacy here, and
Okay.
again we can see 100 milligrams and the big discount on Microsoft. So it wasn't just counterfeit drugs that they were selling; they were also selling counterfeit Microsoft and
So this
software
is
products.
pirated software,
Yeah,
illegal
that's correct.
software.
Pirated.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So
And
and we all know that the news channels talk about quite a bit that most of that software has been exploited at some point. So
mhm.
generally, the people installing that on their systems, paying for it, installing backdoors into their systems that can then be later used by the cyber criminals within their global
Okay, so
networks.
a backdoor, just to define that, that's when a piece of software is inserted onto a computer, which allows an external user to have entry into the computer without the user's knowledge. Is that right?
Yeah, mate, that's 100% correct.
Okay, so now this, I guess this is what you mean by the long con. So they're using the minister's website. So Christopher Pyne has been hacked. He is now hosting these criminals' web properties. For the past 8 months, he's been hosting them, and what they're doing is they're trying to get people to purchase cheap software, which they then use as a sort of second step to get the person's identity off their computer or use them as sort of zombie bots to do hacking and denial of service. So would that be accurate to say that that's what you mean by the long con, is that they're using a multi-stage process to exploit them and ultimately get their identity and bank details?
Yeah, look, they are, and because it takes time to permeate through the search results, and it's a low percentage deal, for their conversions, and then by redirecting them to sites that are containing malware, it's that they are able to exploit more and more computers, and therefore steal more and more identities and create wealth for themselves. And as we know, within this realm, it's not just about product search engine. Search engine marketing companies are selling these types of services,
Mm-hmm.
but selling them to their clients, saying this is a legitimate way to which we go and help you get better rankings. But ultimately, those backlinks that point to those websites affect the how that website interacts with the search engines and its reputation with the search engines. The more bad backlinks that they have, the less good reputation that they present to the search engines.
And are these
Yeah.
political parties, subject to that kind of victimization? Like, would people be approaching them? Do you know of anyone that has approached politicians trying to offer those services?
Yeah, look, I do. There's been SEO companies and reputation management companies that have come in to chat with the political sphere. And a lot of the time, if we have a look at some of those companies, they're not. There is an undertone of illegal activity,
Mm-hmm.
and as you and I are aware, we've been following an Australian gentleman, 21 front companies dealing in reputation management in a fairly large scope, both here in Australia and globally, uh, who is doing just that. And that's very unfortunate because ultimately that then leads to possible government blackmail
Mm-hmm.
of individuals within government ministries and also within their executives.
Well, you brought up a very good point because uh, there's something that I think the public at large, and certainly, I mean, we've seen the ignorance in the political sphere on this topic for sure. But what people don't understand is that when a business's or a politician's own website is hacked, his internal systems are then vulnerable. Can you explain to us how they would use their hacked website to get into the political office itself?
Well, they'd pass through information, so they'd begin phish attacks or spear attacks, social engineering of the politician and their staff, sending emails within their systems that may contain PDFs or Word documents that are then titled using language that the politicians or their staff are familiar with. So the chances of the individual that they're targeting opening that document is very high. Once they open it, if it's running on Microsoft, the chances of an exploit occurring are incredibly high. I guess most politicians in their offices are using traditional antivirus systems, and look, a lot of the antivirus systems are you're able to circumnavigate them because there's more viruses being produced each and every day than the antivirus companies can keep up with.
And
So there's
so,
still a lot of malware being going undetected each and every day, and it's about getting into their systems, exploiting the systems, grabbing the contact list out of their email systems, to then go and perpetrate more fraud or more activity, more exploiting activity.
now, one scenario which I found particularly troubling was just the very simple idea that once these websites are hacked, I mean, it's very natural for a politician or a business owner or someone on his staff to go to the political website for that politician. So let's say Christopher Pyne here, for example, if he were hosting, which we know he's been hacked several times and he has been hosting malware and other viruses and so on, but if his website were hosting malware and then someone in his office went there to check it or to update it and then check their work on a Microsoft machine, which is vulnerable, and we know, like, they're not very well protected in general. With a scenario like that where the website gets hacked and then it's just a simple one-step process to get into the political office machine, is that something likely to happen?
Yeah, it is. Look, it is in this day and age. Look, intellectual property theft is incredibly high in the scope of cyber criminals. Intelligence, foreign government or foreign corporations
Mm-hmm.
seeking to gather intelligence, incredibly high. We see it in the news, quite often. Those exploits occurring, but look, we don't often talk about it, in essence, and it comes back to the information communication technology governance that they have in play. There's a number of legislation here in Australia and offshore that needs to be applied to the digital business or the digital bricks and mortar which make up a website.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 out of 10 times, as we're aware, we actually don't see that implemented. So the mitigation processes that they could be putting in play simply are not being implemented at all. And unfortunately, that falls back on IT and the multiple egos fighting for dominion over the others. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit more about what you mean with the multiple egos. Who would be the
Well, you've got the software engineers, network administrators, graphic designers, software writers. Everyone has a piece of a website, And if we compare it to a traditional council town planning environment,
Hmm.
to go and build a commercial property, we need to make application to council to ensure that our plans are correct and that the plumbers and the concreters and the tilers and the carpenters and the electricians and the roofing specialists are actually creating the building to standard, to Australian standards or Canadian standards or American standards. And what we're finding here, and pretty much globally, is that those standards are not being implemented
Hmm.
by the relevant IT disciplines.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to let you take us through some more of these. I know you've got some more slides to show, and then we'll touch on this a bit further down.
Yeah, look, this, as you see, look, this is Christopher Pyne's website. It just highlights that, here's a term that they were chasing. The URL was there. There's now a 404 error page appearing on this because he's slowly proceeding to take all of these down, which is a positive for the minister,
Hmm.
but also a negative because it was there for 8 months. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, if we have a look at some of the various pages. This is a Google a cache snapshot of the page, and we can see here that there's multiple counterfeit drugs that are being sold. And look, let's not forget at the end of the day, these are counterfeit drugs. They do cause death. Yeah.
Hmm.
Ultimately, it's about identity theft and creating a revenue stream for the cyber criminals.
Yeah.
And they've exploited the Pyne Online website, you know, to almost thousands of pages back in their heyday. And I'll just go through a couple of more page caches from Google search. So Google tells us when it actually cached the page, and this particular one was on the 3rd of February. So this was still live back then on the 3rd of February. And you can see the amount of drugs. And each of these was an independent link that you could actually physically click on. That would then take you to a online pharmacy and a counterfeit pharmacy at
Hmm.
that. And these counterfeit pharmacies have affiliate systems. So and affiliate systems is about sharing the money, and getting it out there. So the more they exploit, the more money that they actually physically make.
Okay.
And 9 out of 10 times, this kind of points back to the RBN, the Russian business network, or the Chinese, or some of the main cyber criminal gangs that exist in the digital
Yeah.
space.
So this is all organized crime, and what I'm looking at here, what we're all looking at, is a Google cache page, which means that this is a page that Google has crawled and has put into their computer systems and is now there sort of for quick retrieval in case the main site goes down. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So these are actual examples of what was there for 8 months on the on Christopher Pyne's website.
And they're all the high end products. Everyone that may be suffering from erectile dysfunction are looking for these types of products. And
Hmm.
it's almost a party drug. In effect, the younger
Okay.
generation are using these drugs, the older generation are using these drugs.
Hmm.
And they're expensive to buy with this prescription because you've got to go and see your doctor. You then got to go to the pharmacy, purchase the prescription, buy it online. They offer it at great discounts. So a lot of people go down that track to purchase it online at a discount without realizing that they're actually giving away the credentials of their credit cards or their identities and their bank accounts.
Got it. Okay. So it's really affecting all walks of life, sort of all age ranges of society.
That's correct, and they couldn't have picked a better target. It being again a federal minister here in Australia,
Hmm.
and look, it's not just this particular federal minister here in Australia. We've seen this duplicated overseas as well,
Um,
with various government websites promoting the online pharmacy products.
so I know when we did speak to the political party in Australia, we did examine more than one website. So how prevalent would you say this is within the political sphere?
Well, when we reviewed all those websites for candidates and sitting members for that political party, we discovered that there was lots of holes. Most of them were using various content management systems such as WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, etc. And most of those were out of date. A lot of the members' websites didn't have privacy policies, and that was a bit insane, to the point that we found several that were using generic generated privacy policies coming from outside of Australia, so US or otherwise,
Hmm.
that have no relevance to Australian privacy policy. So that was mind-boggling. Look, on the instance, we found a couple of suppliers that possibly, we're not doing the right thing by their clients, which happen to be members and or candidates of a
Hmm.
political party. There's a lot of politicians hosting outside of Australia, because it was cheaper. We found politicians whose accounts had been suspended within the hosting company for
I
not
remember
paying their
that.
bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was surprising. But the greatest surprise was the lack of ICT governance applied
Hmm.
to Australian political websites, and the fact that most of the hosting was conducted outside of Australia. And that was really disappointing, because we found the same in Canada. We found the same, in the UK,
Yeah.
which is incredibly sad for the economies of those countries within the IT sphere. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
gone for the 595 hosting in the States rather than finding a reputable hosting company here in Australia, that may be able to offer better services, or finding a hosting company in Canada that
Well,
would be definitely offering better services.
I know for our clients in Canada, I mean, we do business both in the US and Canada and Australia, obviously, but I know that when the Patriot Act came in, for example, we moved our servers back to Canada from the US because we deal with doctors and we can't have their client information. We have to comply with certain privacy policies here, and we just couldn't have them subjected to random searches. And I find it very disturbing that, never mind who does a better job. I mean, you can find competent IT people both in Australia and the US and Canada and the UK. What really is disturbing about all this is the fact that the owners of those websites, and I mean these websites can be collecting constituent information about Australian citizens, and they're subject to US laws, not Australian laws, because those servers are
That's
located outside of Australia.
that's correct, and that's really unfortunate. Yeah, and it you know that's one of the things that we've both voiced disappointment in relation to,
Mhm.
um, because look, how cheap can you go? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You
So
know, it, it's just incredibly sad. But yeah, look, we'll keep moving on.
yeah, yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of obviously Photoshop, Mac serial number software. So the Minister for Education is supporting the students with the discounts. It's great. Uh,
I'd like to think so. Yeah. So I think that with the education reforms that are occurring here, the students can make up the shortfall by getting discounts
on
on
their software.
on their software, or locating a Mac operating system serial number via visiting the minister's website.
Makes a lot of
So
sense.
yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. But again, it just it continues to get deeper. And look, he's not the only politician that's been necessarily affected with this.
Yeah,
We're just
absolutely.
highlighting it because it's taken it's been on our radar for such a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 36 months. They were informed of this by us personally, so it's not like this is hearsay or third party information. I mean, they were informed 8 months ago in detail about certain websites and certain issues on these sites, and it did still take 8 months to resolve this. And we haven't done a deep scan on it yet, but because this happened 3 or 4 times already, he's obviously a target, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're doing another one of these in a few months where he's been hacked again. But just take us through the rest of the slides, and then let's go to the last one as well and touch on that a bit more.
Okay, no worries. Well, if we look at it, we've got discounts here, and again they've inserted terminology within the content, so it effectively highlights that the entire content management system was exploited for them to be able to insert their terminology into the
Hmm.
actual articles that were on his website. These are each independent article, and
So
and that's very unfortunate because that's the second thing. They come and create the page titles, and then they also then start inserting their targeted keywords within existing page content to help promote their product,
I see.
their product website higher within the search ratings because
So
it has backlinks pointing to each of those sites.
they're using his own content to bolster the additional content and external sites that they themselves have put up, and he is hosting for them on his site. Is that right?
Yeah, look, he's
Okay.
hosting links, redirects, so and we've physically seen, redirects quite often in relation to pharmacy hacking, where you'll click on one of these results, and within the blink of an eye, you're actually on the pharmacy website, and you don't even know that you've been redirected. It
Hmm.
occurs that fast. You
Yeah.
think you're going to, Pyne Online, or the website article that you've chosen, and then bang, you're on either an exploited website or a pharmacy website. And if it's an exploited website, it may be attempting to install malware.
Got it.
And then the other areas, if Google recognises it, up will come a series of warnings, and we've seen those warnings. And there's another presentation that we'll be talking about later on this week, just in relation to this site's been hacked or
Hmm.
this site may be hosting malware. But
Yeah.
we'll talk more about that down the track.
Yep. Okay.
So again, just another Google cache as of of Callus, and the amount of keywords that they've created in on the page. And again, each of these was effectively a series of links to other exploited websites
Hmm.
and/or pages on the existing Pyne website.
Yeah.
Here we've, again, a play on words, Pyne, Minister for, and up comes the terminology related to callus, the erectile dysfunction drug.
Yep.
So we've got French pharmacies, we've got, Canadian pharmacies, we've got online pharmacies, UK pharmacies, discounts, etc., etc.
Yep.
The minister for Microsoft, and again, it was just a play on words, just to see how deep, the hack event effectively went. So whether they had been successful
Hmm.
in inserting that into his articles, and they had.
Yeah. Big discount. Microsoft Windows 7.
Yep.
Microsoft Vista Ultimate. I mean, these have no business being on his website. He's not obviously a software sales site, so it's a clear hack. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, look, we're using Google to highlight it, rather than the physical site itself, because this is what Google's saying. This is what the user is seeing when they interact with Google. Not such the advanced search that we're using,
Hmm.
but the generalized searches that they use with Google.
Yeah.
And they're using their desktops, they're using their mobile devices, and nowadays, some people are even using their TVs while sitting in front of the lounge room.
Hmm.
So there's multiple devices to be exploited, and we're seeing that occur more and more often. And then this ultimately leads to data breaches and identity theft. And I think we were looking at that company in the UK that had 500,000 records stolen
Yeah.
within the plastic surgery industry, and
Hmm.
that was mind-boggling. And then that's only just a recent attack.
Yep.
This is the last slide in it, and as we can see here, from a governance point of view, specifically, physical governance and ICT governance, there is no privacy policy. It's like many of those sites that we saw, back in June, July, August, September, October, and November, when we were doing the research within the political sphere here in Australia and elsewhere, that there is no that many of them did not have a privacy policy, so they weren't even compliant to their own legislation, and that's a sad indictment on a political party, however you want to cut the grass.
So what I'm looking at here, and I think for the video there won't be a delay, but I had a slight delay in just seeing this come up. So what we're looking at here is, I just want to stress that this is the live website, a shot from the live website right now as we're speaking. This is Christopher Pyne's policy, which basically says text to come. Is that correct?
That's correct. So
Okay,
if
so
we subscribe, we enter our name, email address, and our postcode to say, hey, this is where we're from. This is how he's telling us how he's about to handle our privacy.
and I know there are at least I had a look just before this presentation. There are at least three cookies being tagged from that website. So my computer was tagged with three cookies, and I have no idea how Mr. Pyne intends to use my information, how he's tracking me across the internet. Um, but as a person who
And
will
who he's
be,
sharing that information with. Yeah,
yeah, who he's sharing it with, but as a politician and as a political party, these individuals write laws which we're expected to comply with and which business
that's
is
correct.
expected to comply with, under penalty. And yet on his own website here, I'm seeing no privacy policy whatsoever. In essence, you would expect, and I would expect the politician to comply. And I mean, certainly we're not picking on Mr. Pyne, it's just indicative of just one individual. But we've seen this, like we said, across multiple political parties in multiple countries. But it's a real shame that they are not leading by example when it comes to complying with their own legislation. So essentially doing a job and then snubbing their nose at it afterwards.
Well, that's right, and I think it comes into play their understanding of IT or information communication technology. We've seen the Attorney General George Brandis not able to understand what metadata was, and here's a great example of a minister not understanding the importance of having a privacy policy. But if you and I were to walk into a traditional shop, like a fairly large shop in Canada or here in Australia, they'd tell us how they're about to handle their information. We can actually request that. We can cite their business credentials, and that's all to do with existing laws and legislation of how a business trades. In Australia, physically bricks and mortar, or physically bricks and mortar in Canada, the UK, and the US. But there is a digital equivalent of that. And what we're seeing is a lack of the digital bricks and mortar across the board, but also across all legislation associated to the digital realm. Because and that's a sad indictment on on safeguarding the digital realm. Because if it was enacted and not necessarily enforced, but actually put into play, credibility would be improving. We'd be mitigating these types of attacks.
Okay. So
And people would understand how their data is being handled.
now I know we've presented at length, and you've gone in and personally spoken to the political parties there in Australia. Obviously, a lot of what was said was ignored. That's clear. But tell me a little bit about how you think that they should handle things differently. Like, how could they go about solving this problem? Is it standardization? Is it bringing in someone like yourself to guide them along the way? But how could they essentially solve this problem so you don't have one guy with no privacy policy, another guy has it, another guy's got Viagra and helping the students by offering nice discounted software for them.
Well, look, as we know globally, it's about understanding their own legislation and how that legislation then applies within the digital realm. And I guess that's the farce. They don't understand how their own legislation applies to the digital realm, and it takes up many factors. It's a lot of best practices, as you and I have talked about in great length. It's ensuring that when implementing a site, that we're looking at it from a town planning point of view almost, to ensure that each of the disciplines involved in the process of creating a website and safeguarding email, the server backend systems, software, etc., implements best practice. And look, we have a model to which we use for our clients, and the best bet for them is to actually engage smart IT people who have an understanding of ICT governance. But the ICT governance is still a growing realm. A lot of people don't necessarily understand its relationship to corporate governance, nor to the legislation to which corporate governance is based upon.
Yeah.
And And that's all about risk mitigation at the end of the day. It's about ensuring that all users can access the website. That's a risk, and it's about mitigating that risk. So therefore, you design to ensure that the website works on an iPhone or an Android phone, all the way
Yeah.
through to being able to work, on a television, a Panasonic television that is internet capable. It's about ensuring that the right colours within the design process are used and are colours that can be actually be understood. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? The
Yeah,
types of
absolutely.
fonts that they're using, and again, we saw a great gap on politician sites just in relation to fonts. Like none of they have these great brands that they create, great colours that they create, but no one enforces the brand. Through the political sphere, ensuring that there is consistency, within the fonts that they're using. Readability studies have been around for a long time. It's a science. It was a
Hmm.
science that was created back in the 1700s
Yeah.
when we were looking at the very first printed books and how people were interacting with those books and reading those books. From a security standpoint, it's about understanding what's happening on the server, understanding where the traffic's coming from, understanding what needs to be updated. If we look at Microsoft, there's a famous saying within Microsoft, what's it called? Patch Tuesday. So every Tuesday, Microsoft issues a bunch of patches to fix security issues or software issues that have been located within their system.
Hmm.
Well, that same premise exists within a web server, or a hosting environment. But quite often we don't see IT implementing that. And that in part could be cost. In part could be laziness. You get the client, forget about it. Yeah,
Well,
and we see that quite often where whole servers, hosting multiple sites have been compromised, and it directly points back to the IT discipline. And the first thing they're going to do is PMA. They're going to protect their bottoms, and and that's really unfortunate. It's about them stepping up and taking on the responsibility to do what's right by the client rather than what's right by them.
yeah. And I think like my background obviously is in business development, and what I find sad is that when you're dealing with business, there's a support structure there. I mean, every franchise, and I would look at this as almost like a franchise model. I don't think you can really muzzle them because they obviously are politicians. They need to speak their mind, but certainly the support mechanism is not there. And I'm sorry, but I, for one, refuse to believe that it's a cost issue. I mean, I've had I'm in Canada, so I'm not completely up to speed with Australian politics, but some of these parties, they do have rather rich coffers, and just to provide this sort of basic support for their politician, their political members, so that they can go there, not look incompetent, not look, embarrassed, not look unprofessional, not comply with legislation, which is that's the most shocking aspect of it. For them to do that would not, bankrupt them in any way. So it's I would seriously uh, argue that it's definitely not a cost issue. It's more of a, as you pointed out, maybe a knowledge or um, irresponsibility on the part of certain individuals within certain political parties.
It takes effort, and effort, I guess, is something that a lot of people aren't prepared to do nowadays. And it's an effort to look at all the components, that full spectrum of optimization across the board. So looking at the domain, looking at the brand, looking at the hosting environment, looking at the software that's then used within the website and the organization itself, making sure that it all merges and actually works seamlessly with each piece. The frequency of update. We've now got social on the scene, and social's been around for a while, and it's about having all of those disciplines work seamlessly with each other, and that takes concentrated effort, as we know. And the way that IT currently presents is very haphazard. You go to a hosting company to host your website. You go to a graphic designer or a web development
Mm-hmm.
company to get your web development. You go and see somebody else for content. You go and see somebody else for social media
Yeah.
uh, consulting, and then you go and see somebody else for search engine optimization and other areas of optimization. Then you've got a security across the spiel. But uh, in the right framework, it actually does work because it's actually governed by ICT governance, and
Yeah.
and governance is about governing that, at the end of the day, in the correct format. And the sad part, we're just not seeing it.
Okay, well, on that note, I think we'll wrap it up. And Mr. Pyne, we'll keep an eye on your site. And, I'm hoping that text to come is not going to be your official policy on your privacy on the website, and that the next time we refresh that page, you will have taken care of that. So thank you, Anthony. We'll see
No
you on the
worries, Nick.
next one.
Thank you. All right, too easy.